is a video that we shot at Ala Moana the other day, just about basically accessing the ocean, right? So, Anne, do you want to talk a little bit about what's going on?
Yeah, so right now we're just preparing to get in the water. I prone paddle with a sup board, and Diane here is wave ski. She does wave ski. Sorry. I don't even know how to say it. So basically, we're just making sure our equipment is tight, dialed in. So checking the fins and the handles, making sure everything has a connection, like a leash or something like that, just in case we get swept off or something. And then Diane is we're coming up to the beach wheelchair. So this is a beach wheelchair. It's called a Moby chair. Positioning to get to the chair, everyone does differently. So I'm more like straight on, but a lot of people just go side by side. And what you want to do is stabilize both chairs if possible, and see how Robert kind of straddles the beach wheelchair, but also has one hand on my chair, just because they both kind of oppose each other when you're transferring. There's forces that oppose each other to spread the chairs out usually. And then this is me getting back into the chair. And of course he's stabilizing again. And I can control my upper body pretty well. A lot of people cannot. So you might have to assist. They might use your knee or your shoulder. Okay, so with
so you're doing it, pretty much by yourself, and you really just wanted help kind of stabilizing the two chairs. But for others, they might need more help kind of moving from one chair into the other.
For sure. And this is where you have that communication before you get in the water. You communicate, what they need, what it looks like for them to transfer onto a beach chair. And some people don't need a beach chair, like Diane here. She just wanted help assist walking because maybe her balance is not so good and things like that. So when you're getting into the chair, though, and you understand the plan, you also, as the person who's helping, you should identify that before you start transferring and getting into the chair. Because the worst thing to do is realize that you need someone else in the middle of a transfer, because that's when things get a little sketchy.
Okay. You just froze for a second, but I think it's okay. Jim, do you have anything to add to that?
The only thing I would add is obviously you've got very calm conditions right now, but one of the most dangerous pieces is actually the shore break. So being very careful, and again, communication, like Anne mentions, is huge. What are there rocks? Is there coral there? What does the shore break look like? Working with the water, making sure that you have enough people and that you're prepared for the lapping waves that might be moving your Moby around, the chair and stuff like that. That's all just part of the planning before you ever get into the water, the communication and talking about it.
Totally. And one of the most effective things is when you come into the water, you let the person know, hey, we're getting in the water. Hey, there's a wave coming, so they can brace themselves and things like that. You can either go, what we normally teach is you turn the chair around before entering the water and go in backwards, so the white water doesn't like smash people and pull them off the chair. Atsuko here is she's an expert at flipping. So one of the things that I do always before taking someone out on something like this, on a prone board, is to see if they can get back on the board on their own. Because the last thing you want is to be out in the deep blue ocean and fall and not know how to get back on the board. We don't want to learn in the deep blue. We want to learn in the shallow, where we have support.
And so can you walk us through that technique that she's using?
Yeah, so she's just, I call it the monk seal action, but Basically, when you're in the back of the board, you're pushing the back tail down into the water. It lifts the nose up a little bit, and that gives enough, it gives a good angle to slide yourself up. And then she just lifts and slides forward, lifts and slides forward. So if you notice, she had her hand and elbows on the board and the straps, and she lifted and pulled herself forward. And you just go slowly. If you need to, in the beginning, you put your arms out and make sure you're centered before you start moving up the board.
Okay, and then one thing you said, if somebody's helping kind of stabilize the board or something like that, you want to make sure to allow the nose to lift. Like, you don't want to hold the nose down, obviously, because you want that nose to be able to lift up so the tail can sink, kind of, right? So that's something to be aware of as a volunteer, I think.
Yeah. So once the nose comes up and then it goes down, that's when you can stabilize more. But at this point, when the nose is up, what you're doing is you're trying to stay in the middle to hold it from going side to side or flipping, right? But you still want that to be that angle to kind of bring the tail down, because it makes it, less work to lift yourself up over the tail and then get your body over. So that's kind of, and then
Yeah.
once the tail comes down, then you just stabilize like normal. How would you do it, Robert? How do you?
Oh yeah, stabilize. I mean, yeah, it's important to just allow this tail to sink. So if you're helping and trying to stabilize the board, but you're holding down the nose, you're actually making it harder for the person to get onto the board. So just be aware of that. You don't want to hold the board down so it can't sink in the tail. But yeah.
Robert, you brought up a very important point. We see this in many different types of conditions. If it wasn't communicated prior to going into the water, somebody who's been out a few times, somebody who knows their piece of equipment, whether it's a wave ski, a prone board, whatever it might be, asking them before you provide that assistance, even in the water, what's the best side for you to get back on? How do you like to get back on? Some people actually flip the board over and they go from underneath and you flip the whole board over, or, left or right side. Sometimes they'll just use the rails to help them, get themselves up, or they'll come in from the back. And in this particular case, we're watching Anne in the Moby come in straight forward because it's very, very calm conditions. As Anne mentioned before, usually we will come in when there's any type of shore break backwards that allows a little bit of protection and allows us both coming in and out of the water to be able to get the Moby back out of the water safely. And anytime you're using a Moby, especially when you have any type of surf conditions, any kind of breaking water, you're going to have a number of people that are going to be stabilizing that Moby, minimum usually of 3, so that you've got somebody that can assist the participant. You have at least 2 that have control of the Moby itself, so when waves hit it, it doesn't go out of control and cause, wind up more damage. Plus, they're able to sink it in about waist deep water, so that the individual can get either, off of it or back onto it. So equipment control, and a 4th person is usually handling the piece of equipment they were on, by the way. So we like to see a team of a minimum of 4, especially with surf conditions happening.
Yeah, that's a good point.
The entry is pretty, like, for in this situation, the entry is a pretty easy situation. And I've trained my nephew for like over 4 or 5 years, helping me, trying to, so he's aware of how to do this. But it is, even no matter if you know or don't know, it's always better to have multiple people to get into that water and control the Moby, because the Moby will float. And once it floats, it doesn't float flat. If there's any kind of wave or any kind of swell, it floats with the swell, and that's when it gets rocky and people fall off and things like that. So here I am demonstrating again, going from the back, and see how I lift that nose up a little bit. Makes it so much easier. I don't have to pull myself up, and then someone would normally stabilize after, but this is like my surfboard, so sorry.
Robert, Robert, you made a wonderful point where Josh, Anne's nephew, let go of the board as she was actually getting on the board. Because if you're trying to stabilize it and hold the nose, it's not assisting Anne in getting on from the back.
True.
Yeah.
It's all about communication.
Yeah. And then I have a leg strap on there, and that's just because if I were to get on my board without a leg strap, my legs would be like all over the place. And I think, but with Asuko, she doesn't have a leg strap on, and that's because there are these wells on the, there's like a, what do they call it?
Like a groove running down the center of the board.
Yeah, it's like a well in the middle of the board where she's being held in by the board essentially, and the straps that are along the board. And they're off.
Same things applies. It would be an issue, and Diane is wearing a strap around her legs too, but that's another communication piece long before you get in the water. Do you use a strap? Would you like to use a strap? If I use a strap, where should it go? Is it upper thigh? Is it, ankle? Whatever the case might be. You don't want folks to feel unsafe or uncomfortable in the water also. If they can't use a strap, you figure something else out or make something else work.
Yeah, but generally speaking, I tell people you should always wear a leash, because that's it basically keeps your board attached to you, and that can be important if you fall in the deep water, because the wind can take the board away can carry the board away pretty quick where you can't catch up to it. So always good to have a leash.
But yeah, a leash is mandatory with anything that we do.
Yeah.
No matter what you're doing. So
I don't know if you see that, but Josh kind of stabilized the nose for me there, and he kind of had his arms stretched out. I would say get up to that nose, use your body weight to help stabilize. Don't just, keep the board way far away from you, because your strength is in your core, right? So you want to be able to get close up to the board, keep your arms close to your board, and almost touch your body with the board, so that you really have your most strength, so that you're not, so Josh is kind of like moving forward, and that's really good. And he's letting me control the board, but while I'm doing it, he's also like not letting it tip too much, and that's a skill definitely to have.
Yeah, and it's more about the stabilizing the side to side movement, and not the up and down movement. Like basically you want to allow the board to go up and down, but not tip side to side too much. So yeah, that is a little bit tricky to understand, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Coordinated all of that with Josh beforehand. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So I guess in the beginning, you want to get to know the person you're going to take out, right? So your person. We can use Kai again with the individual, where we know the person, get to know them, get to know how they enter the water, how they exit the water, how they get on the board, what type of style board they have, what type of style they want to do, like participate in the water. Any kind of risk or any kind of things that delay their function in some way. You want to get to know how they communicate. Also, you want to get to know if their communication is reliable or not reliable. And then, of course, I always ask if there's any fears or any kind of things that I don't know that I need to know to get into the water. That's kind of the last question I ask to get to know the person. And of course, use the people that are around. Ask. So if if the individual walks in with a caregiver or a friend or a family member, they usually know the way to help. So the individual may need to know may know what they need, but the individual that's with them usually knows how to help them. And so it's always good to get an idea by asking the people that they're with or the individual to get a better picture, a more fuller picture of how you can get the person out in the water safely. And then, of course, the last thing before you get in the water is just identify those risks, identifying all of those things that um, are necessary, what kind of equipment we're going to need, and things like that um, to get out in the water, and what could be potentially dangerous for that person. Yeah.
I just wanted to mention here that you're using your arms to help you balance out. Yeah. Like a prone board like this is really rounded on the bottom, so it's quite tippy. So for you to be able to do that on your own is pretty impressive, actually. It's not easy to slide on a board like that from the back. But yeah, using your arms kind of as outriggers for balance is a good idea.
Yeah, and I also like that method of like pushing up and then going forward. It really does help too. And um, I have a little less function in my core. So, um, from my chest down, I can't feel or move. So I really use I'm very dependent on my upper body, my hands and my arms for everything. I don't know if you saw me kind of doing egg beater with my hands. That's how I turn. For me to get balanced, I have to have my hands out, um, and things like that. So if you notice, I do a lot of different things to be mobile. If you notice, there's like a neck thing I put there, I think of my hat there. That's not only just, my hat, trying to hold my hat, but it actually is trying to hold my neck into a neutral position so that I can use it as a fulcrum.
So usually you have a foam pad there that has a Velcro attachment to the board, right?
Totally. Yeah. The less things that will fall off when you fall is the best. So try and Velcro everything on as much as possible and make sure it's nice and sturdy because, you never know if you get hit by a wave, a swell, maybe even wind. Falling off is inevitable on these prone boards when you get out into big water. So I usually use a neck pad, and then that little, it has like maybe a 2 to 2.5 inches, and I use that as a fulcrum, so I can paddle as hard as I want, and just having my chin on there, it it stabilize it stabilizes me so I can stay centered. Because when you're paddling, opposite stroke, right? Left, right stroke style. Or even like you're doing J stroke while you're paddling forward, to correct for the whatever, the wind, the current, whatever. Um, it it can be not centered, it could be asymmetrical, basically. And so if you put that chin rest on there, that's your fulcrum. It helps stabilize you while your arms are out in the water. Sorry, that's a lot of words for that small little chin rest.
And then the technique that you were showing to turn the board was just like doing, like you said, the egg beater. So basically making circles with both arms in the water. Yeah. That's a good way to turn because you have both arms in the water for stability as well. So that you want to talk a little bit about this neoprene and Velcro strap that you use?
Yeah, so leg strap. Generally, people who have function in their legs, who can close their legs, it's an adduction movement where they close their legs. If they have that, they don't necessarily need a leg strap. Diane has it, but it's weak. So she doesn't want her legs to like fall off. It's hard, she uses a lot of energy to keep herself in midline. So if we can help that by using a strap, then you know, she doesn't have to think about her legs. She can think about, you know, paddling and her arms. And, you know, it's like, you know, conserving energy so that it can be put out in a different force in the water. So that's kind of on that. So even if we had a little bit side guards for her, she wouldn't have to focus on her core um, and stabilizing her. She could actually be in the middle, placed in the middle. She can have side guards that could hold her in, so she's not utilizing too much energy. And also, if the side guards are there, then she could just like have the slightest movement and change the trajectory of that board. Um, with this, she has to like kind of pound down a little bit more. So on my regular surfing board, I have these two foams that kind of hold my knees in, and that actually allows me to translate any movement of my leg, even though I can't really move, but I could use my upper body to move my lower body. Um, and that will change the trajectory of my board because all the force goes into my board. It's kind of technical, but
Interesting. So you actually kind of move your leg, the weight of your legs from side to side to turn and things like that.
oh yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. I mean, like everyone does.
Right.
If you
Right.
watch like a bodyboarder, and
Well,
I just had to learn how to do that without muscles and without being able to control my lower legs, so I can do it with my upper body. And actually in the water, it's like the water is like my concrete basically. So the water helps me move my lower body through um, putting pressure in the water. And that's kind of how, like when you catch a wave, um, some people will put their hand in the wall of the wave and they like move up and down, and that can like move their board up and down too. So that's kind of like how I do that same kind of concept, but on flat water, I'm moving my lower body so that I'm in the, so like if I wanted to turn, I could lift one rail up while I'm in the water and paddle, and it'll help me, it'll be easier to turn.
nice.
So like right here, I'm trying to turn right, if you notice. So I am doing a J stroke on that right hand and a forward stroke on that left hand. Oh yeah, see, I'm showing that. There you go. And then you could see my board lifting too, because I'm actually putting pressure in the water to move my body, and it translates into the board.
Jim, do you have anything to add?
Not really. I mean, I understand the video is a little bit impromptu, and Anne brought something up earlier that's vitally important prior to going into the water, and that is, you know, we have quite a few pads that do have the Velcro on the bottom. So in this case, I know, you know, you're kind of MacGyvering something there for your neck. But generally speaking, that's a large part of the conversation with the participant is, you know, can we use a chest pad? Should we use a chest pad? Should we use a chin pad? You know, depending on the piece of equipment, how do we Velcro it in? How do we make sure that it's stable and that it's comfortable for you? So even on the land, there will be a lot of positioning and checking. Okay, that doesn't quite work. Let's get a smaller pad or bigger pad or whatever to ensure not only the comfort in the water, but certainly the safety. Because if they're able to see well, they're able to use, you know, some muscle control depending on that pad, it's just going to be a more enjoyable and safer experience.
Yeah, for sure.
That's where like that flat shore helps a lot, because you can get them on the water. You could get individuals on the water and they can tell you, oh no, this doesn't work. Or, and then you could just easily swap out the pads too. And so when you identify it early, then you know, okay, I might need this one or this one. So let's get you on the board. Let's position you. Let's see if you feel good in there and paddle out a little bit. And then, okay, if it doesn't work, we're going to switch it out, and, you know, have that plan in place already. Um, and that definitely helps the situation too.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, to go in flat water first to kind of practice and make sure everything it works. It totally makes sense. It's just a lot less intimidating than going right into the surf, especially if you've never done it. You know, for someone that's like first time on a surfboard, going out at White Plains and waves is definitely going to be pretty intimidating, I would think, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
so
very
that-
much so. We do wind up with, especially with newer participants, we'll spend a considerable amount of time right there on the beach before we ever go on the water. Yeah, just checking everything, check positioning, checking padding, checking whether or not, leg straps would be a good idea, not a good idea. So, yeah.
Zuko does this so well. Like she uses her elbows to push her up and pull her forward. On that last one, it was definitely visible. See how she's kind of pushing up and then pulling forward.
Mhm.
Yeah, she does this so well. This is someone that when she first came to us, she couldn't get on the board by herself. And, she had to be carried on the board. People had to be holding the board. I mean, just, it's amazing how a couple months can make a difference. And then she uses a shorter chin pad. If you
This is
see
something
that.
I wanted to mention too, is like the bark boards, a lot of times they have part of that recessed deck in the front, it has kind of an upsloping shape, and you want to have your chest kind of resting on that part, and that automatically kind of lifts up your chest a little bit. So you don't want to be too far back, you want to be pretty far forward on that part, right?
Yeah, and that kind of depends, like if people have lower back issues, the higher the chest thing is, the more strain on the back it is.
Right.
So we want to definitely have optimum like paddle range. And if you notice, I'm kind of measuring her to see if it works for her, and I'm looking at her shoulders. So if you look at the shoulders, you're going to see, okay, we don't want the shoulders to be totally out, because if it's totally out, what happens is the shoulder is a very unstable um, bone structure, and that joint um, is only held by muscles. And if you are stretched out, you're prone to injury. If you keep it closer, and how she's like a little bit closer, that becomes more ergonomic for her. And the higher the back is, the more ergonomic it is. But we also have to take in consideration the higher the back is, the more strain on the lower back it is too. So I take into consideration all of those things in movement, and try and get it so that they're comfortable, they're safe, but they also are reducing they're reducing their risk to injury in the shoulder, especially if you haven't done it before. A lot of people, when they haven't done it before, they go hard in the beginning because the mind is very strong. But we want to make sure we reduce any kind of injury risk for those things. And I think here, Diane is using the wave ski, and it's a surfing craft, but it can also be done on a flat water, especially if you're learning um, how to stay balanced and how to paddle. And so Diane's been on this forever, and she's still perfecting her paddle stroke. And if you notice, she's trying to bury her blade, and because before, she would just puddle in the I don't know how to say it, where it's only part of her blade is being buried.
Yeah, it's
Right.
important to use the whole blade to get a good purchase on the water, and so it doesn't slip through the water, basically, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
But yeah, and then definitely practicing the technique and turning and all that stuff before you get in the waves is definitely always a good idea. No matter what you do, no matter what sport, just practice in calm conditions and become very competent in doing that before you even attempt to go in the waves. Yeah.
Hey, Jim, about the, when you go in the water, before you go in the water, what kind of conditions, what kind of safety are we looking at?
Wow, there's 100 things, but one of the most important, again, at least what I look at from a water safety standpoint, is just looking at the conditions on the shore break. What are going to be our initial challenges on getting folks in and out? Where is the cleanest area? Where is there the least amount of rocks? And then when working with volunteers based on how we're getting folks into the water, for instance, um, is it a Queen's carry where we're actually putting them on the board for first? Is that going to be the, um,
Can you
teaching
turn
them a
off
little
the
bit of,
screen? Sorry, Anne, can you turn off the screen sharing? Sorry, Jim. Keep going.
no, that's good. So yeah, so really it's shore break. How are we going to enter and exit? Wind, current. I'll usually go out first before anybody gets in the water. I'll get there a little bit early. Do we have a really strong current? Is it a normal current? Is it different? Based on where we're at. To be honest with you too, especially in a surfing situation, how many folks are in the lineup? Where are we at? Do we need to clear some of the lineup, out a little bit if that's okay, depending on where you're at? You don't want to go and tell people to go away, but where am I going to set up my water safety folks? And then it's just working with the volunteers very specifically on training with things like communication. What things do we report? How do we do that? What are the hand signals? And then what are we looking out for together as a team? And then communication between the team, the water safety team, and the instructors and the folks and the transfer team that are actually putting them on the board. That's all going to be key so that everybody knows exactly from beginning to end how we're getting them on a board, how that board's getting into the water, how we're meeting those two together, how, who's taking them out, what the specific challenges are, and then how are we going to safely get them back out of the water.
Exactly.
Okay, great stuff. Thank you. So, and then Anne, you said also on the Access Surf website, there's videos as well that are helpful for training, volunteer training and things like that, right?
Yeah. So if you go to accesssurftraining.org, we have our volunteer manual on there. And if you look up the skills, there are videos and things like that, especially for transfers and positioning and stuff.
All right. And then we'll get into more detail in our volunteer training class. And yeah, thank you so much for your time. Good stuff.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for putting this together.
Yeah, do you want to add anything else to it?
Get out there and have fun. Woo.
Yeah, don't forget to have fun. That's the most important thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, there's a lot of things when it comes down to it, there's a lot of things that we think about, but when the main thing is like getting out there, having fun, but also just learning from the mistakes that you make. Allow them to happen. I mean, like you and I, the way we learn to surf, the way we learn to stand up paddle, the way we learn to paddle, whatever it is, the way we learn to move is to get to know our body. And a lot of the times when we make those mistakes or when we wipe out or whatever, we need to replay that and be like, oh, so what did my body do? Where was my angle there? And as we get to know our body in motion, we become better and it refines our ability to participate in that water activity, whatever we want to do. So, and that's always fun to have that process.
Yeah. Actually, at the beach, you gave some good pointers on on kind of finding your balance and kind of centering yourself. Do you want to go into that a little bit? Some tips on that?
I don't remember what I said. What did I say?
You're saying like, go from focusing outside and then go kind of toward inside and then back out again, things like that. I thought that was pretty cool.
Oh yeah, totally. So whenever I get in the water, it's like more of a mental thing because the mind plays a lot in your ability to participate in whatever activity you're doing. And I always get in the water and I focus, my focus is normally out outside of me. Like, what am I doing there? What is the environment? Blah, 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 blah. But, you know, when you're on the water, it's kind of you on the water. So I go from outside and I go internal. Okay, so what is my body doing? What am I thinking? What am I feeling? Kind of center myself. Where am I at? Um, kind of center myself so that I can be intentional to the activity. And as soon as I'm able to get centered in like where I'm at mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, then I'm also able to start being intentional in the environment. Now I'm looking outward. What kind of water, what kind of environment am I in? How does the water feel? How does the current feel? How does my board move? How is my board moving when I'm just sitting here, right? Um, what are the winds like? What is the sun feeling like? All of that kind of stuff. Just kind of getting idea where you are in the space of time, and it kind of connects you to the environment that you're in. So you know you, and then you know the environment, and then it connects you as you are moving through the water. That's kind of what I do.
I think that's great. This is really good stuff. Another good tip is like if you're having trouble finding your balance, is don't look down at your board or at the water, and try to just look forward, kind of where you want to go. Look at the horizon, look at something that's not moving around. You know, the horizon is stable and land is stable. So sometimes if you kind of focus on the water and your board and looking down too much, then it can be really hard to find your balance in that if you focus on the water basically instead of looking forward where you want to go.
Yeah, you go where you look for sure. You mean like a lot of people, they're like, don't get that rock, don't crash into that rock, right? When they're looking at the rock, they go crash into the rock. That's just how it goes, you know.
Right.
But if you're like, oh, go towards that way, or oh, that's a good pathway, go to that pathway, then they'll go to that pathway. So
All right, good stuff. Should we talk about that real quick? Let me screen share that. The Kai, this is Dwayne DeSoto's thing that they came up with for ocean safety and stewardship. You want to talk about that a little bit?
sure. So Dwayne talked about this at a cultural training that we hosted with surf. I forget what that organization called, but the one with the kids at
Nakamakai?
rescue. No, not Nakamakai, but the other
Oh,
one, like surf. It's the one that Dan. Jim, do you remember the name of it? The one that Dan goes to in Waikiki, the kids, and they surf.
Yeah, no, I'm so sorry, I
Gosh,
don't. He does put on some absolutely incredible training, and anybody gets a chance, or like conferences. There's conferences every once in a while, Big Wave, and just ocean safety conferences. Those things
yeah,
are awesome.
totally.
Yeah.
So, anyways, he uses Kai as the word, and KAI. Know your limits. Ask the lifeguards and identify the hazards. And so he goes into it in this document that's on his website, nakamakai.org, and just kind of getting an idea like, know before you get in the water, know what you can do, know the things that you've been through, use the experiences to allow yourself to know, hey, can I go in this kind of water? Or have I gone into this kind of water? And what did I do when I was in this water before? And things like that. And, who was I with? That kind of stuff. Know who you're with, know that stuff too. And it's always good to have a buddy system because things can go wrong in the water. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, I was a first responder to a drown, someone who got a heart attack. Actually, it was 2 weeks ago. So, something, and he's like a long time amazing surfer, and so knowing the limits, knowing who's around and what their limits are, is important, and being able to have like that plan already in our head of if something does go wrong, what what can we do or what should we do? Ask a lifeguard. Get on the people who have the locals, the lifeguard who have, I mean, we know definitely the lifeguards know the beach. because they probably are in there, every day. They've probably seen all kinds of different conditions in the water. Just try to get to know, and ask them, hey, what kind of things do I need to be looking for? Is this a good day for me to be out? This is, and a lot of times they use observation. So for my experience, when I would ask, I would ask not so much like, is this a good day for me to go out? Because lifeguards don't know my abilities in the water. But I'll ask, hey, what's the conditions like? How does, get an idea of what are the hazards? Where is everybody getting a hard time? Understand like where the currents are going, what direction, even like the wind patterns and things like that. And, how strong the waves are, because that's not always noticeable. Any kind of other things. Yeah, that's a good picture of it. Kind of where I should swim, where I should surf, where I should paddleboard. Getting those ideas from the lifeguards because they know that water very well. And then the other thing is identify those risks. And once we look at the water and we see all those things that are shown here, um, we can identify any hazards. And a lot of times the hazards are currents that we can't see. Um, wave size, strengths of waves, rocks, any kind of animals. Um, what else am I missing? Something else. People, I mean, yeah, pretty much everything. Look at those signs, identify those signs. Like, is there man of war? Is there a rip current? Is there, steep drop downs? Because that's another one. Or shallow areas, so you don't want to dive in a shallow area, things like that. So, yeah.
Good stuff.
I think one of the most important pieces of that, I have a small business where I wind up being around tourists, a lot of tourists at different times. And, one of the questions they inevitably ask is, hey man, I'm a surfer out of Idaho and, I can't wait to charge, whatever. And, I have no idea. They might be fully capable or not. The one thing I say, and this is highly identified in this wonderful little briefing that's here, is just stop. When you get to a beach break, just stop and look, see what's going on, see how folks are getting in the water, where's the lineup. If you see really good looking surf, but you don't see anybody surfing it, there's a reason. and, and ask some of the locals. And if you're respectful, and this goes for anybody, then you're going to do yourself a huge favor. What's the safest way in, safest way out? Where's the best place to be? Where's the shoulder of the wave? That kind of stuff. But it's just taking that minute. It's just taking that time to really observe and be aware. And if you can, go ask the lifeguard, or at a minimum, talk to some of the locals. That right there is, to me anyway, that right there is a bunch of it. So.
Yeah. I forgot about the tides too. The tides really affect,
I always like to watch at least one set coming in. Like sometimes you're in such a rush to get out that you haven't even seen a set coming in yet, and it might be way bigger than you think it is, or it might be smaller than you think it is, just because you haven't taken the time to wait and see what it really looks like.
Like a full set, because there's freak sets too.
Yeah,
Can take out the whole place.
Yeah, even places I go all the time, I'm in the habit. You just stop and just, what is really going on? Where is it pushing? How's it coming over the reef? Is that going to push me into the reef? A south swell coming into an area versus a northwest swell is going to be very different on what it's going to do to you. And you just jump in and go, woohoo! And next thing you know, you're like in a place you didn't really want to be.
Right.
Yeah. My brother, when I first learned how to surf, my brother taught me to watch the periods, like between the time it takes for each wave and how many waves in a set, just to count it out, because a lot of the times I'll take like the second wave or third wave or whatever, then I'll know like 15 waves are coming behind me, or one wave is coming behind me, and then I'll have a lull to be able to. And how long is that lull? Is it like a minute? Is it like 20 seconds? Is it 10 seconds? That's always good to know, because if you do find yourself in the situation where you've wiped out in the break zone, it's always good to know, you know, like knowing is power, right? So dive deep down when you're coming up, when you see the wave, how many waves do I expect to be under the water again, you know, and things like that. And it helps. It helps a lot, actually, for me at least.
Definitely, and it's also good not to take the first wave of the set, right? So you don't get the other ones on your head.
Good point. Depending on where
Try the
you're
whole
at.
set to catch a wave, and sometimes they don't.
Besides, it cleans everybody out anyway, right?
Yeah.
You want that last one anyway.
Okay.
You know, the only other thing I might add, just, and this isn't very general, I'm not exactly sure what this might be used for, but you know, for anybody who's volunteering for any, not just Access Surf, but anybody who's gonna, you know, assist in some of the other programs that are on the island, or whatever the case might be, whether it's a volunteer or whether it's a participant that's looking to come out. This has been said a few times, but you know, ask questions. I mean, this is so new to so many people. Volunteers are not used to working with, you know, those that may be cognitively or physically challenged. It's a very new experience and can be a little intimidating, I suppose. And for participants who haven't been in the water for a very long time, or have never been in the water, which, and you know, and Robert, I'm sure you know that we get, you know, quite a bit, especially with Wounded Warrior and stuff. The more that we can push, or the more the folks know that they should ask questions. If something doesn't look right, or they just don't know exactly how a process works, don't be afraid to ask. Find a key leader, find somebody who's in charge of that area. This literally is a really great saying in this particular situation. There are no stupid questions, because it is such a different practice. It is such a different way of getting in and out of the ocean, of working with folks, of what we might need from a volunteer. And you know, there's plenty of training that's provided, there's plenty of briefings, but that doesn't mean something doesn't get missed, or you see something that doesn't look right, or it doesn't feel right. And that's a big thing too, and that's been mentioned. If something doesn't feel right, it probably isn't right. And somebody needs to get somebody's attention or ask the question.
For
That's
sure.
a good point. Another thing that I think is really important to make sure you have coordinated before you go out is like what you do when you come back in, like who's in charge of helping the person and who's in charge of taking the board. You know, sometimes in shore break, that can be, you know, if nobody's watching the board, that board can become a dangerous weapon, right? So you have to be really clear who's in charge of what when you're coming out of the water, right?
Very much so. And that's why for our transfer teams, generally we'll have a lead for each of those, or anybody that's, you know, anybody that's on water safety. And we have a specific beach safety group that does that. Robert, that is immensely important. Just as you see them coming in, you're doing your hand signals, you know that they're actually coming in, and right then and there, you're coordinating everything. At what point are they going to come in? Who's first? Because sometimes you have to, you know, line people up. How are we getting them out? Do we have the right equipment? Do I have the right people? Do I have enough people? Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and then like it's also good for the individual who is surfing independently or paddling or whatever independently to know that order too, because they won't, a lot of the times if you get stuck in that shore break, um, you know, you can't control it, right? So you then become, you know, the first person out because you're in the shore break. So, you know, to approach the shore break, you want to make sure you know the order of when you're going to go out in the water, because it helps them so that you can time the shore break from happening if it's challenging. If it's not, then they can just like wait in the safe area, the safe zone. Usually a little bit outside of the shore break is the safe zone, unless there's a lot of backwash or something, or wind. So, and then always be open to asking too, right? You know, asking for help. If you cannot negotiate that, say, hey, can someone come swim out by me and kind of show me how to negotiate that? because sometimes there's rocks. There's a lot of different, especially on the North Shore, when you're coming in the water, there's like rocks, there's shore break, there's, shallow, there's like all kinds of stuff going on. So you want to make sure you time it right. So you're watching the waves and you're like, okay, ready, 1, 2, 3, okay, go. Or, after this wave, or, you're communicating as you're doing it, or before you're doing it and while you're doing it, just so that you guys are all aware. It's hyper aware of the most dangerous part of the session is like that shore break and getting in and out of the water.
It's definitely one of the most dangerous parts, and a
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
people just don't realize it. They think the big wave out there is what's going to hurt you. Nope. It's that little guy that's going to crash you right down and take that 11-foot board and put it right on top of your head and take 2 other people out too.
With
And
the skate.
yeah. And Ann, you mentioned something else, and man, we're just going through practically everything now. But there are also, people, along with asking questions, there is always the possibility that you just have to say it's too dangerous. I mean, I'm just talking access surf for a minute. We'll go into, we're very safe in all of our conditions, and we check conditions very carefully. And so from our perspective, it's kind of rare that we don't go out because we can create safe zones and so forth. But there are times when we have said no. We said no, the conditions are just and you have to be ready to be able to say that, maybe provide an alternative. But if you're doing something as a volunteer where it's a much smaller group, where you don't have 100 volunteers around you, but you're doing something that's smaller, which Access Surf does, Access Buddy and that kind of thing. And I had to do it with Buster. I mean, this is what I do. And a month ago we were out and it was just me and him, and I expected somebody else. And I had to tell him, I'm not taking you out. It was just too much. There was too much going on, too much energy. It was too wanky. It was too windy. There was too much current. You just have to be prepared to say that too. And it's the wise choice sometimes. If it doesn't feel right, if it feels too dangerous, there's always another day.
Totally.
Yeah.
There's plenty of waves out there.
Yeah. Okay,
Even
well,
for flat
let's wrap
water.
up this recording. So
Yeah.
thank you, Jim and Ann. Really appreciate it.
Thank
Aloha.
you. All right.